Red light, green light, red light, green light, red light, green light, red light, green light, red light.
Well, folks, as Scots, we do love a drink, but we also love a good deep fry up as well, because folks, grab a drink and pull up a chair. It's time for another episode of the Soul Sessions, of course, with your host as always, Soul. But with me today, he is Scotland's fighting fry cook, Chip Watson. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Soul. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing well. You know, the drinks are flying. The weekend is here, so we are relaxing and getting to enjoy ourselves. You know, but you know, Chip, I have a routine with this show. You know, I have an echelon of lists I have to go through. There's a plan here, and I have to stick to the plan. Every guest has a story. Every story has a beginning. How did your story begin as a wrestling fan, my friend?
TNA. Well, TNA to an extent. My dad is a massive wrestling fan, and I don't mean like, oh, I liked wrestling, so my dad liked wrestling. I mean, like, I pretty much only remember watching wrestling. I don't remember a time where I didn't. So I think my dad used to have me on the couch, you know, as a child with WWF on or you know, early WWE. And I was always like a Rey Mysterio guy, you know, an Eddie Guerrero, all your big baby faces from kind of the early 2000s. But I think what really took it to the next level is when he started showing me TNA, and it was your Styles, Joe, Daniels, you know, Shark Boy, Curry Man. It was those guys that really caught my attention. I went, oh, there's more than just this one thing. You know, I think maybe as a child I thought wrestling was WWE, and then all of a sudden it was like, nope, there's this whole other thing, and it's got boobs and it's got violence, and it was TNA 2005 era is kind of what I think cemented me as a lifelong fan.
Oh, an era indeed of joys and titillation and Vince Russo's sex faction. I mean, hey, the whole 9 yards. You get what you want. But I want to touch upon how you said that, you know, your dad loved wrestling and it's such a family aspect of it. You know, with media, we see like how the pantomime people will go to as a family, or cinemas or movies or even music. Was it about wrestling, do you think, that has such that connotation with families?
I think it's the combination of it's a variety show, or at least good wrestling is, where you know you go and see a film and it tries to make you cry and laugh and you know maybe be scared. And I think wrestling at its core does the same thing. You know, you've got those matches where they want you to fear, they want you to be concerned for what's happening. That's the nature of it. But then you know you've got your guys like Santino that are there to make you laugh and kind of make those moments of drama feel more. You've got the you know the storylines where they want you to cry, and then when you combine that, I think with high quality wrestling, how it's presented, you know, especially if you look at WWE now, it's a TV show. They make sure then before every segment, you know what happened last week. You know, it's very EastEnders. But I think it's somewhere between performance theater and like mixed martial arts, but much closer to performance theater than the latter.
Absolutely, and especially with modern WWE as well, you know, like how every episode that ends on Netflix has like the executive producers, Triple H, Paul Levesque, and it was like, oh my god, I'm just expecting a laugh track or something, or Jerry Seinfeld. And it's like, oh wow, we're really hitting on that. Do you think that with how modern wrestling, especially modern WWE, is presented, you know, it really is in that full-on entertainment era than more than people have said in the past, where like, oh, this is the network era, this is the PG era, and it's truly in that media era right now?
Yeah, I think so. I think you see it from how things are presented outside of the show in terms of, you know, oh, now we're going to do press conferences like boxing or the MMA, and we're going to sit and we're going to talk about our gate sales at every opportunity. You know, we're looking to they're collabing with guys like Speed and Kai Cenat, you know, guys that, you know, maybe would have done a guest show host like in yonder years, but largely would have been ignored. You know, even looking at, you know, your big TikTok reactors getting featured in, you know, reaction videos by WWE, you know, they're seeing value in that. They're not demonetizing and copy striking things as much because they know the value of that coming out. And I think it's because wrestling at its core is so circular or circular. You know, I think until maybe 3-4 years ago, we were very much in the work rate era. Black and Gold NXT, peak, Western audience for New Japan Pro Wrestling, the Bucks, Omega, guys like that, kind of defining what people were watching. And, in the UK scene, I would throw things like WCPW and Defiant into there as well. They were very much about that style and these huge indie names. And, that's still the wrestling I love. But I think when you look at what people are now starting to imitate, it's everyone wants to be Cody Rhodes or The Rock, or, they want to do these big, dramatic, year-long storylines that result in a turn maybe more akin to kind of ICW than Western New Japan show. So I think we're very much in the entertainment era of wrestling, and I think WWE in particular are now looking at how they can make wrestling appealing to someone who doesn't like wrestling.
I think it just speaks to how media has evolved. People are like, I don't want these TikTokers or Twitch streamers or all this and that here, but it's just how media has evolved for consumption. If it was something like Mike back in the day, if I saw like Ray William Johnson or Smosh on, I'll be like, that's cool, that's my thing. But now it's all these new age streamers, and I'm like, I can't relate to somebody who just shouts and barks all the time. Like, that's not my thing.
Yeah,
but it just speaks to the evolution, right?
Well, that's it. I mean, I'm of the age where I grew up with YouTube starting. So I'm not someone who was born and YouTube was like already this big thing. It kind of grew with me, and I've kind of always been in around it. When I'm not running the chippy, I help run social media. I do the social media for the chippy. So I've kind of got to have my fingers on the pulse that way. And, like you say, I think Smosh is a great example. I think there was someone that used to work on Smosh whose husband is one of the members of TM61. And for ages, it looked like that was going to present an opportunity to maybe get someone from Smosh or that scope into WWE. And it just never happened because they didn't see value in it. Social media and YouTube was very much just that thing that your friend does for fun. And we kind of look at them and go, okay, what are you doing? Whereas now, you can get degrees that are designed to help people become solo content creators. You can, go out there. If you told someone you want to be a YouTuber, they go, okay, well, let's look at how you do that. And I think it's just people who are, looking at, I think Speed's a great example. I think Speed killed it in the Rumble. Almost literally. But that is the equivalent, I guess, of maybe 20 years ago, someone with the reach of like a Tonight Show host or, Chris Tarrant in the UK being on these shows, because his reach is international, but also like really passionate and an audience that maybe WWE doesn't appeal to on its own.
Absolutely. Do you think as well, with the focus on people like Speed, Kai Cenat and everything, it also speaks to the downfall of the presence of television, where you're not really getting people that were doing television hosts to be involved in these things? And in general as well, television has always been in the decline, with streaming on the rise.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think even if you look at the shows that people watch on network television, they don't watch it on a television. They watch it on, Amazon Prime or on Now TV or, Netflix. They don't, necessarily sit down and watch it on a, Channel 4 with 20 sets of ads in between. So, I think even if you look at the biggest stars in kind of television, they're branching out into other areas, or they've come the other way. There was that TikToker Francis Bourgeois who blew up for watching trains, and all of a sudden he had a STV, ITV show where he was going out and doing that same thing, but on their TV show. So I think there's still an audience for them. You see it with like SNL cast members, but I think WWE's focus is clearly on internet audiences and then musicians. I think between Triple H's love for music and also just, the reach that music has, someone like Bad Bunny or Travis Scott now, it helps again get them to an audience where they really want people to look at wrestling again and go, oh, wrestling's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe Travis Scott will sing while John Cena's beating the ever-loving shit out of him. This is like a bar fight back home. This is making me feel homely. I love it. I mean, it's the way things are, and that's just the evolution of media. And obviously, Travis Scott, we've kind of briefly mentioned there, who's aligned with this Rock John Cena faction of Hollywood on that. What's your thoughts on that? Like, Triple H is thinking of putting together The Rock, John Cena, and Travis fucking Scott.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird one when all the photos came out of like people comparing it with like the NWO, and you had Hogan, Nash, and Hall, and it's like, yeah, I mean, Cena, Rock, Travis Scott, sure, but I mean, there's tons of theories going around. I'm just enjoying the ride. I'm intrigued to see what happens, but I mean, given the black eye he gave Cody Rhodes, I mean, he works tight, he works stiff.
Yeah, well, better be afraid of him, or Cody's going to take away that weird hardcore belt he has. So I mean, we'll have 2 belts, Cody now. But hey, digress on that point. We'll bring back the wrestling fans away from our television talk. Come back, folks. Don't worry. There's plenty more. Just enjoy for yourselves. TNA, quite an important company, honestly, with what Jeff Jarrett did in the past and building up from those early 2000 days with the likes of Christopher Daniels, AJ Styles, Monty Brown, all those people who really cemented the company's history. For yourself, Chip, in the broad spectrum of everything, looking from the inception to where it is now, how important do you think TNA is to the overall picture of American wrestling?
I think without the success of TNA, you don't get the success of New Japan in the US and the UK. You don't get the success of AEW in the US and the UK, and you probably don't get the success of a lot of more in-ring focused independent companies in the UK. I think it was a digestible mix of here's Kevin Nash and Paparazzi Productions being all funny and he's got a pretend broken leg, and then right here's Shannon Moore and AJ Styles having a random 10-minute match where they do 90 different things that are going to blow your mind. Here's Amazing Red doing a Canadian a Code Red while Pete Williams does the Canadian Destroyer. It also introduced people, especially early days when they were doing like weekly pay-per-views. They introduced a lot of Japanese guys, Liger's been on there. Even like down the line, you had guys like Okada go on there, although his run didn't go, great. It still introduced a different style of wrestling and style of presentation to a lot of fans, and especially with how it was shown in the UK, being available so easily, it just created a situation where it warmed the palates for more of that style. And then from there, it was the groundwork was laid.
Absolutely. And many great moments in TNA. And I want to propose 2 key moments, Chip. And what do you think was more memorable and more impactful for TNA? Steiner Maths or Ric Flair and Jay Lethal's Woo Off? Which is the better? Come on.
I think it's got to be Steiner Maths. I think I know non-wrestling fans who share Steiner Maths when it comes up because it's just become such a thing. The Woo Off was great. And then I think the other one in a completely different ilk is the big old jump off the cage. That's the other one that gets shared constantly. But I think Steiner Maths is probably the most iconic, arguably top 10 most iconic promos of all time. Doesn't necessarily mean it was good or effective, but it's going to get shared at least once a week on wrestling Twitter, and it's going to blow up every time.
Very true. If I had Steiner Maths back in the day, I actually would have passed my hires in maths. Hey, you win some, you lose some. But obviously, well, with TNA, match types galore, and the matchups they've had are so iconic. Just from like Kurt Angle, Nigel McGuinness, obviously Desmond Wolfe at the time. You have Monty Brown and Jeff Jarrett back in the day. You have AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels putting on bangers. But I think everyone goes to the one match is Christopher Daniels, AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, Unbreakable, Freeway.
Yeah.
It's insane how that match has stand the test of time. The fact is that even when they are bringing back Unbreakable for during Mania weekend, everyone was just like, AJ Styles is going to be there because he has to, because he's so synonymous with that name. Or even Christopher Daniels and Samoa Joe of AEW might make an appearance somehow because they're so iconic with that name. What is it, Chip, you think about that triple threat that has made it stand the test of time? That whenever a triple threat happens, people go, yeah, well, it's not better than Styles and Daniels and Joe back in Unbreakable.
I think there's 2 things that go for it that I think helps massively. The first is obviously in-ring. It's ridiculous. The athleticism, the pacing, the work rate on show is insane. But it's also not super long. I think the issue with a lot of super work rate matches is that they are super enjoyable to watch live, be that on a stream or in attendance, because you're invested at that moment. But if you take like Omega Okada, you're talking like 58-minute matches, and it can be difficult when you're in your house with a dog barking, or you've got to answer the door to parcels or do stuff around the house to sit and fully invest in a 58-minute match. Whereas that match is so jam-packed of action. The video quality for how old it is has held up fairly well. And the pacing of it is great. So you can sit down, you watch it, you give it all your attention, and then you go, oh, that was great. I get the hype. Whereas like matches that are, 45, 50 minutes, typically they pace it a lot slower at the beginning. And if you're going in expecting, something you've been told is match of the year, and you've only got like 30 minutes your day to watch it, it can take a bit of time to grow into it. But I think that match is probably one of the most iconic things in TNA history. I think outside that, you're looking at Abyss is unequivocally synonymous with TNA. You've got, Styles, Joe, Daniels, all are. Jeff Jarrett is. For me, Curryman, Shark Boy are. Suicide as well, original Suicide with the dive off the cage. And of course, the biggest what if in wrestling, Monty Brown, Marcus Corvon, what could have been. But yeah, I just think TNA created a lot of stars that have gone on to do incredible stuff. And I always say to people, I think peak wrestling for me in terms of like time periods, like WWE as a company for me is probably the peak because it's lasted so long, being pretty consistent outside like the late 2010s. But you've got Lucha Underground because every episode was jam-packed action, stuff you hadn't seen before, new guys. Black and Gold NXT, probably from just before Owens and Zayn, right up until probably Gargano and Ciampa. Peak sort of mid-2000s TNA, and then Best of the Super Juniors. Those for me are like those peaks of wrestling. I sit and go, yeah, I've got to do this. I've got to try and do this because I watch it and I go, yeah, that's it. Time to get in the ring.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what, Joe? I'm going to throw the hard question here for you. We mentioned those three men: Christopher Daniels, Samoa Joe, AJ Styles. I want you to rank them.
Okay.
Who's in your three? Who are they?
I think it's probably Styles, Joe, Daniels, and I think that comes down to in ring. They are all great. I think Styles is probably one of the best in ring workers of all time, but also his adaptability to different styles and different companies. He's also been the guy at one point or another in every promotion he's been to, which Joe and Daniels haven't necessarily. And then I put Joe above Daniels just because for me his look is one of the coolest things ever. When he busted Daniels open in that kind of three-way feud period and then wiped the blood on the towel, and then that led to him walking around with this blood-stained towel for like weeks on end, was great. I mean, Daniels is great, and Daniels has the caveat of also being Curryman, spoilers, which shows kind of the range he's got, and he is phenomenal. But I think they all peaked for me around the same time, but obviously at that point Daniels was slightly older, so then he's teared off a bit quicker. I think up until this stuff with Paige, he's not really done anything in the AEW that's caught much interest. And Joe has kind of just cemented himself as like the guy backstage as well, which I think goes a long way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, AJ Styles is just killing it in WWE, comes back and he's somehow the biggest man in France. I don't know how, it's just happened. Daniels is obviously retired this year in an exceptional Texas Death match against Hangman Adam Page, and Samoa Joe's in a Yakuza game. So I mean, hey, they've all. I still need to play that game because I'm skint as fuck and I can't afford it. But I mean, it looks fun as shit. I mean, hey, just to say you get to fight Samoa Joe in a Yakuza game.
Yeah, I'll play all of that game in Japanese language until I get to Joe's bit, and then I'll switch it to English to hear his voice acting.
Literally, I feel like it's just like, I'll stick with it for now. I was like, hang on, folks. I know the dub or sub debate is quite volatile, but it's just Samoa fucking Joe right here, so we have to go
exactly.
Right back to the dub. That's the fun of it as well. But I do want to obviously talk about, as I say, every story has a beginning, but every story does have an end. We've seen Daniels end this year with the Texas Death match. For yourself, Chip, on a personal level, what do you think would be more emotional, seeing Samoa Joe or AJ Styles hang up the boots?
I think for me, it's Styles. I think Styles, his career has moved almost in line with me growing up. So it's always been quite a good indicator of like, oh, I've just graduated high school and AJ Styles is IWGP heavyweight champion. Oh, I've just finished my second year at uni and Styles is in the Rumble. Holy shit, this is awesome. Joe, he's equally important. They're probably both top 10 to me, but Styles he happens to line so well with where my life was at various points that it's like I wouldn't have that anymore. But also I feel like he's got one more full pelt run in him, and I'm just waiting to see what they use that with. He's kind of, since he came back all jacked and super over in France, he's done some stuff that's been pretty cool, but I feel like he's got one last, oh my god, this is AJ Styles run left in him. And I don't know who that's going to be with, and I would hope it's someone coming up, to kind of pass the torch over. But also, part of me wants to see him and Ospreay one last time, him and Joe one last time. So, he said he's never going to wrestle in his 50s. So, I don't know when his contract's up, 2026, 2027. I think he signed a new one recently. So, maybe we just let him enjoy a nice, easy end to this WWE run. And then he just goes absolutely mental for 1 year, gives us all these dream matches one last time, and then he can go and plays retro video games and chill.
I think maybe you might need to make Triple H and Tony Khan a good chippy supper. Break the bread or break the batter sausage. All peace along us, so we just get Styles and Ospreay one more time. So peace, folks. Come on. That's just the amazing thing with Styles. He's an exceptional performer. Banger themes all around. Even the new one I actually kind of liked. The New Japan one's my fucking favorite. I think that's just an exceptional theme. And the story continues, and now TNA has this relationship with WWE. I remember when I first saw it, officially announced, and it was the whole graphic and everything, and then John Cena puts this on Instagram, and it's like, oh wow, this is real now. Yeah. This is real. As a lifelong TNA fan, to see this crossover happen, is it the most surprising thing to happen within American wrestling?
I think so. In recent, I think it was one of those when it happened. It makes sense now, given where TNA is at and where WWE is at and who's in charge and, the changes that have happened. But it was one of those when it happened, I was like, oh, okay. But then you see how it's been executed, and it's not like a little half-arsed, this guy used to be X Division champion. It's like, oh, here's Moose, here's Joe Hendry, here's the Rascals, here's Jordan Grace. They've kind of gone all out in it. And, it's one where they need to not go to the well too much with it, but there are still some big matches there that particularly could help TNA kind of build on the momentum that they've already been getting, but also, help create new stars in both companies. So I've enjoyed everyone they've kind of used so far in different ways. Obviously enjoyed Joe's stuff for the obvious reason, but even seeing the Rascals back together, that was sick. Moose and Nova Femi, hell yeah.
It's absolutely a mental mashup we're getting as well. And even Abyss is going to be in the next WWE game as well, in a DLC pack. How the fuck's that happen?
Abyss and New Jack in a WWE game. That's
that's somebody really being like, right, we've got 2 extra spots. Who do we want? Greg and Accountant, what have you got? Oh shit!
I want New Jack.
I want New Jack. I want him with the gangsters theme as well. Give him everything. We can't. It's copyright. I don't care. EA can do it. We can do it. Just blow up the budget. Why not? That's what we do. But obviously, with TNA as well, you mentioned Moose, obviously X Division champion, and the X Division is such an integral title to the history of TNA. I've had Austin Aries on this show, and we talked about him implementing Option C, which is something that's been so iconic with that belt. Do you think for belts that are, classified as mid-card championships should always have an extra stipulation on them, like the Ring of Honor Pure title or the X Division title with Option C?
I think it definitely helps. I don't think it needs to be all of them, but I think it added to the X Division because it stopped it just being the belt. Oh, you give it to the flippy guy or the guy. It's not about weight limits. It's about no limits. You don't just give it to them as a good job, but we can't put the big belt on you. It created that pathway for guys like Sabin and Styles. So I think it helps. Gift of the Gods and Lucha Underground was cool as well. I think people remember these things more than they maybe remember whatever the 4th belt on AEW's TV is. I think it helps, or even the ROH TV title. Like, I remember it because I love ROH, but it's one where you go, yeah, that's a title. But it's interesting. I think X Division title is the one that when I started training, and we're talking, as you do about, if you could win any belt, and it was X Division for me. I think the problem is when you look at the guys around me, I think Judas Grey is probably more the fit for X Division, but I'll just need to take him out when he's not looking, and I'll take that one. But X Division was always the goal.
cheeky there, mate. So I got to know, who's your prime X Division champion? Who's the one that you think of when you see the belt, whatever design it is, you immediately think X Division?
It's one of those. It's Styles, it's Sabin, and the one I always remember was the run where you had guys like Suicide and you had the red steel cage. And I think it was Lance Hoyt was about to win, or it might have been Sonjay Dutt was about to win. Another guy I think of in that X Division pretty consistently. And as they're about to drop down from the cage, Suicide just does a swanton off the top of it onto a conveniently placed group of extras and wins it because he just literally jumped off the cage. And that has just been ingrained in my head since it happened. And every so often I'll go, I should go back and watch that match. And having watched the match is all right. But that moment, moments make wrestling. And that moment of him diving off, as I've gone, right, that's what I need to channel into my wrestling is, I might not be AJ Styles, but I can be the suicide dive off the cage that everyone talks about. I can be the Tuchel Scorpio dive. I can be, Steiner Maths.
Oh, you can help me pass my old mathematic course. Thank you for that. Hopefully we can see that. But obviously, Chip, as I say, once a fan, always a fan, but you would be the fan that would take the extra step to the square circle itself. And, we obviously grow up and idolize the American wrestling scene because that's what's so popular. But for yourself, what was the journey like exploring the wrestling scene out your very window?
So it's a weird one. I was super, super into, if we talk during like the Brit Res boom, kind of pre-pandemic, I was really into the English scene. I watched ICW, I went to some of the disco shows, but like my bread and butter, I was getting the 10 p.m. bus from Edinburgh down to London to get in at 5 a.m. to go in queue for Progress at the Ballroom or Progress at down in Manchester, and watching guys like Pete Dunne, Trent Seven, Osprey, Paul Robinson, Aussie Open, these sort of guys kind of tear it up. Toni Storm, Jenny in the women's division. And what I love about that now is, although I don't watch that scene as a fan as much anymore just because of, commitments and, do my own thing. Guys that started coming through just as COVID happened and I stopped watching that scene as a fan are now at the top. I think Progress NPS just before COVID that had Gene Money in it, that had OJMO in it, Michael Oku. And these are guys that now, Gene Money helped me win my last match at year 10. He provided the distraction to let us recover. OJMO wrestled one of my good friends, Ronan King, over in CPW. These are guys that, I was looking at, seeing them in the position I am now, starting to come through, that are now the guys in British wrestling. And, it's a really cool feeling.
Absolutely. Progress, I have had a relationship on, I've had multiple Progress champions on this show. I've had Lee McAteer, who's the current co-owner of Progress. I have my Progress replica title over there in the corner because I like to do a word called redecorating, not by much, but sometimes. And it's truly an influential country. Like the likes of up here in Scotland, obviously, is ICW with Grado, the Fight Club documentaries that were done by the BBC. It's so ingrained within the history of our scene. But for down south, it really is the likes of Progress, of what Jim Smallman did back in the day, that whole punk vibe coalescing with British culture and wrestling culture, to then the partnership with NXT UK, where it is now. They're going over for WrestleMania weekend in Las Vegas, where they're going to have the likes of Rio versus Nina Samuels. Like, it's insane to see what Progress is still having that impact within British wrestling and even essentially worldwide wrestling as well, because, there's stars everywhere. For yourself, Chip, do you feel like Progress is truly like the echelon of especially English wrestling, of like that place where if you speak to a trainee, they're like, oh, my dream is to make it onto a Progress card.
Yeah, I think there's a few. I think their Progress for me will ultimately almost be the goal down south, because you can go and watch Chapter 69. I'm there in the crowd. Ilya Dragunov makes his debut, and I'm there smacking my leg because I just seen him in WXW. Like, for me, that's paying back me, the fan. But also, you can't look past Rev Pro, North, TNT, these sort of companies as well. You got smaller ones all around that are doing incredible stuff. But those kind of four for me, TNT, North, Rev Pro, and Progress, are the ones where I look at and go, when I look at the guys that I want to be, the guys that in this island that I want to get to their level, that's where they're working. And then up here, obviously, you got Disco, the biggest company in the country, 500 people coming to every show, could be more. You've got WrestleZone up north doing the same. I think in the space of 2 weeks, we had 2 500 people shows, one in Aberdeen, one in Edinburgh. You got the stuff that CPW, APW are doing. You've got ICW doing their thing. And then obviously I would not extend for complex political reasons, but OTT in Ireland, I think I would put in alongside your Rev Pro and North and Progress in terms of, I remember seeing Minoru Suzuki versus Keith Lee there. It's these are the ones where you look at and go, let's get to that level. Let's get to the level that they want to experience Chip Watson.
Absolutely. And I think that's just, you mentioned Minoru Suzuki and Keith Lee. It's like nobody would expect that to happen in donkey days.
Yeah.
For yourself, Chip, when you've ever been to like an independent wrestling promotion, what match on the card was the most surprising to you and thought, I would never thought I would see that in 10 million years?
Oh, good question. It's probably one that happened at Scrapper Mania or on like a Progress Super Strong style weekend, or, seeing stuff like Aerostar versus Kyle Fletcher is just one that, like, does it really make sense? Trevor Lee versus Jordan Devlin, maybe. And then you look over in OTT, and like I say, it was like, here's Minoru Suzuki versus Keith Lee. Here's Ishii versus, I can't remember who it was. It might be an Osprey. And you're sat going, these are just, I'm seeing this, a 45-minute flight from where I stay. This is a New Japan main event. I think there's also ones looking back now that at the time made complete sense. A lot of shows where it was Progress guy versus Progress guy. But now looking at where they've gone on to be, and you're looking at like a Pete Dunne versus Osprey, and you're like, oh, that match will probably never happen again. But I got to see it in front of 200 people, front row, and it was sick. Aussie Open versus British Strong Style, probably never going to happen again because of the directory of the two different teams. But it was just, you were so used to it, and then you had, Progress bringing over guys like Austin Theory to challenge for the Atlas title. And it's just like, those were matches at the time you were like, yeah, this is a cool match. But now you're like, oh, that's mad. That makes no sense. And I think you see it in Disco as well. I think the Disco account tweeted it out during the night of the Rumble. This year's Royal Rumble pay-per-view, every single match had someone who had wrestled in Discovery Wrestling. And that's mad that, a promotion from little old Scotland, more so than that, Edinburgh, had Cody Rhodes, who was in, against Kevin Owens. You had Candice LeRae and Piper Niven, who were in the Women's Rumble. You had Joe Hendry, who was in the Men's Rumble while not even signed to the company. And then you had Chris Sabin, the inaugural Y Division champion, challenging for the tag titles in a 2 out of 3 falls match against DIY. And you just sit and go, at the time, Piper versus Candice LeRae was probably like, this is a cool match. But looking now, and you can go back and look at a bunch of old Disco cards, and you're sat going, Chris Hero? Colt Cabana? This is mad. And I think younger fans of Disco won't realize the stacked history there from the amazing work Alan did.
Absolutely. And let's get right into Disco. Obviously, Discovery Wrestling, I've had a history with Alan Smith, the previous owner. I've had twice on the Soul Sessions. Great guy. We love talking about the past of Disco, from the crazy moments of, getting into the scene, building cards, and just having that evolution of the company. And especially, the Cody Rhodes surprise Ring of Honor match as well that happened at the title there. It's like, holy shit. For yourself, Chip, obviously to be wrestling for Disco in its new era, led by Mr. Joe Hendry. I've not said his name, he's not here. Good. Just your thoughts on seeing Discovery Wrestling in its current state and obviously getting to be a part of the company with its wide array of history.
Yeah, it's crazy because I went to disco shows. I think the first one I went to was at the Corn Exchange. There was a great match between Osprey and someone that we don't talk about anymore, but it was a really good match. And then you had the Elite on that show as well. And now I look at that, and Joe was on that show, Aspen Faith was on that show, Dave Conrad was on that show, and now I'm sharing a locker room with these guys. Right there, Joe, the guy that brought me into wrestling, and Aspen Faith, who I credit with the reason that I'm probably good enough to be where I'm at now. It's one of those where I think what disco is and what disco was aligned to like a PWG. I think you look back, especially at the Jam House shows, or even the Corn Exchange, that ROH, PWG, here's all the best names from Scottish wrestling and the best from English wrestling, but also here's this import from the States or Mexico or Ireland that's going to show you. And I think we're seeing that. You look at Debbie Keitel challenging Emersyn Jayne in one of the best matches I've seen at disco, and now Debbie Keitel's off doing her thing in Japan and is probably going to become one of the biggest women's wrestlers in the world. Emersyn Jayne already at that level. You look at some of the matches that Buffy Club versus Polo Promotions versus the Elite versus Kings of Catch, and you look at it and go, this match is insane. And I think that's what disco still is now. It's maybe a bit more polished and maybe a bit more tidy in areas, but I think that at its core, it is still wrestling done right. And I think that it's super exciting for me now to be a part of it. Over the last sort of 40 months, I've gone from doing little things during the raffle to, having a marquee match at year 10, the first match announced for year 10 and a street fight branded around me, around who I am, the chip shop street fight. And all the support that got from, the guys backstage is insane. And it's just, it's wild. Like, it's not really sunk in that like 500 people watch me hit James Erdos with a fish.
Oh, it was a beautiful moment there, seeing that in person and seeing that fish fly right into the crowd. I was like, there we go. That's someone's dinner. It was a joyful moment, my friend. And I'll say with Discovery is that it has that great environment, has that great branding, and the great wrestlers within it. Yourself, and Ronan King and Judas Grey, Daisy Jenkins was wrestling there in the past, Ashley Vega was wrestling there in the past. The good times, my boys, Monstrum and Robb Stow. And as well, I got to talk about those belts. Those beautiful, beautiful belts. I'm a belts guy. I mean, my bank account says so. That is just who I am. I love a good shiny belt. And I love all of those belts. But what I remember I spoke with Alan in the past was that you see was mostly in American wrestling is that sometimes when independent promotion starts, they go back to like iconic designs like the Winged Eagle or the Big Gold and make that themselves. And that's totally fine. But I love when a company makes it unique in their own. And the Y Division Championship, it's such a unique design and immediately grabs your attention, that massive Y, the gold all around it.
Yeah.
Just your thoughts on the Y Division Championship and its place within Scottish wrestling history.
I think it's one of the most prestigious titles when you look at the lineage. That's a belt that's currently held by the next big star to come out of the UK in Leon Slater. A belt that has been held by Chris Sabin, Gene Money. It's Joe Hendry. It's a belt with not a huge amount of owners, but everyone or almost everyone to hold that has gone on to great things. And Leon Slater is going to be the next in that. And I would love to be, maybe not the next one or the next one, but the one after that. I told you I want to win the X division. Y division's pretty close. But also, I love all the belt designs we've got. I mean, Scottish Openweight has got the outline of Edinburgh Castle embossed in it. Something that I ran around, worked beside, looked at from the chippy every day. Sort of, get my hands on that. I don't want to take it off my boy Judas Grey. But if the situation calls for it, I won't hesitate. But right now I've got my eyes firmly locked on those tag titles. year 10, don't particularly like what went down with Good Times taking it off my boys Skull Brawl, especially given they beat up those really flanky looking trainees, with their new making their debut, looking all sick, Big Sean Marks, Xander Mystery looking sick, and then getting treated like that didn't sit right with me. And Disco Fry, undefeated this year, and I wasn't teaming with my regular partner in Germany, but me and Mr. Ravie-Davie nearly got the win over the Good Times then. So, get a couple more wins, wait for some people to soften up the Good Times, and then maybe we play to their ego a little bit and take those belts off them, because they're pretty tag titles, that's for sure. I'd also love the women's belt, give me them all, but I don't have the facilities for that one.
Fair point in there, mate. And the Good Times they're an exceptional team. Robb Stow, Monstrum, both been on this show before, so I support any guest of the show, but you're now a guest of the show, so you have my support. So I want to give you a chance. If Monstrum and Robb Stow, whatever boiler room they're brooding backstage, making threats, is there anything you want to say to the Good Times if they might be watching?
I think it's pretty simple. Monstrum, Stow, you're gonna find out at the end of this month what I can do to Monstrum at Attitude Pro Wrestling, because I'm gonna send a message to Monstrum and Robb Stow and the Good Times on that show, and then I'm going to keep being a nuisance, and I'm going to keep pestering them and beating them in any way I can until it's clear enough that the Disco Fry deserve a shot at those Disco Tag Team titles. And then when that happens, it's not going to be the Good Times, it's going to be the Greasy Times.
Oh no, guests fighting one another, please stop. No. Stop. No, don't continue. It gives me content. Please stop. I feel like Willy Wonka in the classic movie of like when Augustus Gloop goes like, no, please stop. Don't do it. And it's like, have fun. Just don't come back and assault me, please. I like this guy. Obviously, well, with Disco, they have the Disco Academy, a place where people can go and become the future of Scottish wrestling. For yourself, Chip, how have you thought with seeing what Disco Academy has accomplished and achieved? Because they've had great seminars in the past. I believe Moose has been there as well in the past.
Yeah, Moose, Mike Bailey. It was a weird one. I came in, so it was still Joe Hendry's wrestling school, a wrestling academy at that point. I knew Joe through, stuff outside wrestling, and I just kind of messaged them about looking to get involved. He invited me to come along, and frustratingly, I loved it right away. I was kind of expecting to like it, and it would be a thing I do, and now it is like the thing that takes up my most time, because I've got the bug, and it's an interesting one. I think we don't take in a high number of students. Disco Academy is about small by design, creating world-class professional wrestlers, so people need that individual time. But the hit rate for people who came out of Disco Wrestling Academy, Judas Grey, Robb Stow, Charles Douglas, James Erdos, myself, Mayhem Brooks, trained there, Ryan Richards, and guys like Conor Malloy and Ronan King, who, WrestleZone graduates, but also now training down at the academy. And then you look at the coaching staff there, Joe Hendry, biggest non-signed wrestler or non-WWE signed wrestler in the world right now. Emersyn Jayne, probably one of the best women's wrestlers in the world right now. And Aspen Faith, a guy who has forgotten more about wrestling than most guys will ever learn. It's a great place to be, and it's an interesting one, because I came in through Joe, learned so much from Joe, and then I think in the latter stage, as Joe's kind of taken off, I think I owe so much to guys like Judas Grey, who I probably at one point might have packed it in if it wasn't for him pushing me constantly to be the best I can. The camaraderie between Erdos before he started getting in my business, and Ronan King, Robb Stow, Major Matt Wolf, guys like this really kind of brought together. And then one guy I didn't mention in the coaching there, because he's no longer with us. He's not dead. He just lives down south. Is Ian Skinner, Mr. High Energy himself. Again, a man with just such a mind for wrestling, but also a great way of breaking stuff down. I where I am now in such a short amount of time compared to, you know, other people is entirely down to the environment and the world-class training I receive, but also the people around me kind of constantly pushing me to be better. You know, I remember doing card workouts with Emersyn, Jayne, you know, just dying of sweat, and the message being drilled into me that it didn't matter how quick I did it, it was about the discipline to do it. You know, there was a story told to Kenta, watching a guy in the New Japan dojo doing this card workout, and he was getting to the point with push-ups where he was just dropping and hitting his head on the concrete, and Kenta walks up and he doesn't stop him, he just puts a mat under his head so that he's, you know, falling safely. And it's that discipline that now means that I'm not the most athletically gifted. Wrestling doesn't come naturally to me in a way that it does other people. But because of those moments, I'm like, oh, okay, I can fail this 100 times and get up and I'll nail it on the 101st. So, you know, all of those guys. And then, you know, Conor Malloy, you know, gorgeous and talented. He paid me to say that. Omar Mohammed, one of the nicest guys in wrestling I've ever met. Bruiser Brad, these are all guys that I've now been able to start learning from and training with and taking in all their knowledge. And, you know, latest guy to come out the Disco Academy, Sean Marks, you know, his debut didn't go the way that he was looking for, but I think he looked damn good for a first match. And, you know, debuting in front of 500 people, that's not a bad way to do it.
Hey, not a bad way to do it. And I love the sense of camaraderie of just everyone supporting one another to be better, because, you know, if everyone succeeds, then, you know, everyone does succeed. You know, it's not a one-man game. You know, you have to be linking arm in arm. One thing I want to talk about, Chip, is something that, you know, I've experienced pretty recently, and it's a word that I think you experience with anything you love and any passion you do, any hobby, is the word burnout. When that occurs, you feel like, do I still want to do this? Do I want to pack it in and just like, you know, it's a great run, but I can't do it anymore for some reasons, where it's just life gets in the way, you don't have the passion anymore, or it gets tough, or you feel like some people are doing it better than you. For yourself, Chip, if you've ever experienced burnout, how do you prepare for that, and how do you get past it?
Annoyingly, I'm going to put Judas Grey over again here, which I really didn't want to do because he gets it so much. But I remember speaking to Judas maybe a year or so ago, and he said something about, if I don't make it in wrestling, I want the only reason it is because I wasn't good enough. I don't want it to be that I didn't train hard enough or give it my all, or, you know, put the work in at the gym, or put the work in nutritionally, or, you know, take every opportunity as it came. It just needs to be that I wasn't good enough. And anytime I'm tired and, you know, don't want to get out of bed to go to the gym, or, you know, oh, there's this opportunity to go and train, you know, I've been really lucky over the last year that myself, Ronan King, Charles Douglas, Judas Grey have gone down and trained with Ian Skinner down south, Liam Slater, Nathan Back, Big Damo, Flash Morgan Webster, you know, really learn from the best of the best around. You know, when those involve getting up at 4 a.m. and driving for, you know, 12 hours round trip, it's that statement from Judas of his mentality that is ingrained in my head now. And the reality is, if I can do 50% of the work that Judas Grey is putting in, I'm not going to get burnt out, because it's just the rewards are going to keep coming.
Fine words to play by. And I think for Judas, I'll definitely listen to Judas by Lady Gaga later today for him, for all his wisdom.
Tune.
Tune, yes. And then it turns up on your Spotify rap, and you're like, how the fuck do I explain this? Nah, you just drink tons of rum and say it was a drunken stampede. Why not?
Exactly.
Obviously, let's get into Disco 10th anniversary, the Chip Shop Street Fight. Obviously, successful. Congratulations, with a wee hand by Gene Money. Now, James Erdos is in your hands at the chippy now. So, I mean, what are you going to make the boy do? Is he going to be battering sausages? Is he going to be cutting the chips? Is he going to be stocking stock?
He's not entrusted. He's not entrusted with food yet. He's got to pass his health board certification before he can touch food. You know, we've got good standards at the Disco Fry, but he's been building pizza boxes, cleaning windows, sweeping floors, selling my merch for me at shows. You know, we're going to put him to good work. And I think with myself and Erdos, that's a devastating tag team for any tag division. You know, we might not have that chemistry yet, and I'm not entirely sure if I can trust them. But I tell you what, as a man who has been dropped in tacks by him, hit over the head with chalk, like a chalk menu board by him, had vinegar sprayed all over me by him, hit in the head with trays, hit with a concerto with chairs. It's a guy that I actually think I'd rather have fighting for me than against me now. So I'm looking forward to see what magic we can do as a tag team. he's getting a wage. You know, we're a living wage employer at the Disco Fry, so you know he's at least getting that. But he's still a bit, you know, oh, I don't want to do this. I only came here to draw the raffle. How has this happened? I may be incompetent, but I'm not a wrestler. But you know, I reckon we got the makings of something there, and you know, with Robb Mills, you know, there to come in as needed, you know, that can create the numbers advantage.
Well, it's going to be a fun old time. I'm sure you'll put the boy to work, and if he gives you lip to say he's an apprentice, you don't have to pay him. I mean, that's one way to
Smart.
do it. I mean, hey, big brain plays here. We try our best here. But obviously, you know, chippies are quite an essential part of not only just Scottish, but Edinburgh culture as well. We love our good fry up. So I want to know, Chip, give me your dream fry up. Just whatever you include, like what menu, what item is your dream fry up?
So I'll do this in two. Breakfast fry up, the most important fry up of the day. I'm going tatty scones, black pudding, crispy bacon, scrambled and fried egg, sausages link, not square, like fried diced potato with peppers and onions, and then some beans, but the beans have got to be in a separate container so that I can control the dispense of the liquid. Then wee bit of builder's tea on the side, milk and two, the way that God intended. Then, you know, afterwards, this is where I'm not a supper guy. I'm a multiple singles guy. I like chips, but it feels a bit like, you know, being a cannibal at this point. So instead, I'm talking steak pie single, you know, Scotch pie, macaroni pie, chicken nuggets, you know, black pudding supper. If we are going to supper, that's what it'll be. Kebabs, love a kebab. Again, would prefer the sauce separate so I can dip it. But yeah, in reality, I'll eat anything that's not fish. When you work with fish every day, the smell, you know, I smell fish and I get ready to serve a customer. But yeah, that's the breakfast fry up, and then it's probably chicken nuggets, steak pie single, and then you know maybe a small 10-inch pizza, or 16-inch. In reality, if we're being honest.
Oh, Chip, you're hurting my soul. Why of all episodes that I record this on an empty stomach? Oh, oh, you make me emotional. Oh, the emotions are coming out. Oh my god. Oh, the stomach, the pains. Oh, screw the bank account. I need to fry up after this now. Oh,
tell you what, a good macaroni pie, one where you can taste like the mustard through the macaroni cheese. There's not many things better in life. I've not had a child yet, but I still think that a good macaroni pie will probably be better than the birth of my child.
That's quite an emotional statement.
It is.
Oh, God, I love it so much. I'm going to drink more just to appease the hunger. Oh, I love you, Rum. I love you. But as well, disco obviously mostly in Edinburgh. And Edinburgh is a cultural city. The Old Town, the New Town, Edinburgh Dungeons, the Fringe Festival. And I remember I spoke with Lee McTeer, obviously, with Progress being in Camden Town. And the culture of that coincides with Progress. For yourself, Chip, how do you feel the culture of Edinburgh correlates with disco wrestling? Do you think it has that bounce off one another attitude?
Yeah, I think it's, when I look at Edinburgh, the first thing that comes to mind is the Fringe. It's the Fringe, it's the castle, it's the mix match of harmonious integration of cultures. So for me, I look at that and I think that's what disco is. You know, you look at the Fringe and you talk, you know, best of the best from around the world, but also new and undiscovered acts. So if we look at year 10, you got guys like Joe Hendry there, man like Derice, Aspen Faith, you know, Emersyn, Jayne, Ian Skinner, guys that are established to the audience. Gene Money, you know, and his role in our video coming through, and they're there. But then you've also got, you know, as much as I don't like them, the good times. You know, you've got Mystery and March. You've got Chip, Erdos, that people might not be as familiar to. You've got Ronnie King, Conor Malloy, Judas Grey. So it's that mix of the best of the best. You know, you go and see your trying to think of good comedians who aren't cancelled. You go and see your Russell Howard, but you also then go and see some 18-year-old doing his first stand-up gig that in 10 years' time is going to be doing the Apollo in front of a sold-out crowd. And I think that's what disco is. You've also got that mix of cultures, that mix of styles. You know, you got maybe the more lighthearted, fun stuff that I like to do. Then you've got Emersyn Jayne killing people in the most terrifying ways, and it's great. And then you've got Joe Hendry just with this masterful control of the audience. So I think it's that integration, that mix of old and new, familiar, unfamiliar, but in a polished, high quality way. Portobello Town Hall is a beautiful venue, especially 500 people in there. But also it's in the same way that Edinburgh is historic. Portobello Town Hall and disco wrestling are historic. You can go back and watch, Colt Cabana wrestle in Portobello Town Hall, over a decade ago for disco, and the balcony wasn't quite what it is now. It's much more of a product of its time, but the wrestling is the same, the surrounding is the same, and there are fans that have been to shout out those fans that have been to every single disco show in Edinburgh. These areas, they are so familiar with the stories, and I think those are the sort of fans I love. Disco's got them, WrestleZone's got them. I'm sure even their newer CPW, APW will have them as well. People that can tell you when, I was there when Chris Sabin won the Y Division title, but I was also there when Leon Slater won it. And that scope of time is insane. They've probably gone from their early 20s to mid 40s in that time. It's crazy. And, those are the lifeblood of wrestling.
Absolutely. The people that are always there from the beginning to the end, or even the journey in between, they are the lifeblood. They are the support factors, and they are the ones that are needed for wrestling to continue and thrive and grow. Now, of course, you mentioned the Fringe there. And I've been on this big crusade here on this season of the Soul Sessions and asking people thoughts on this. We've had Mythos Ragnarok, which was a wrestling-based performance of Norse mythology. You've had people do wrestling stand-up. Chip, do you think it's possible we could see a disco wrestling show performed during the Fringe?
I mean, I would love it. I think one of the sickest things ever is if you go to Mexico and you go to little community hubs, they will have a ring in the middle of like a cobbled street or like a cobbled square. They'll have barricades around it, but there will be like 300 people there watching it. Gala culture in Scotland and the UK is great, but you're performing to a passive audience. Whereas like in Mexico, because Lucha Libre, that culture is so ingrained, they put a ring in the middle of the town square, they put an entrance ramp, wrestlers come down, they have sick matches, and it's just this mix of fans, people who are just checking what's going on. It's probably a logistics issue more than anything else. Do Edinburgh Council see it as safe? How much would it cost? Because, anything in Edinburgh during the Fringe is extortionate. But if I could click my fingers and we had, I'm thinking like left of Edinburgh Art Gallery, right at Princess Street Gardens at the Mound, that little strip there, ring there, little entranceway where people can come out, people can watch from the, the gardens, up on the stairs. People are walking down the street, might turn in. You've got people banging on the ring and around it. Hell yeah, that's like peak, Mexican wrestling, PWG, CZ Dub. Like that energy is so much easier to feed off, and I'd love to see it. Maybe if I win the lottery, I'll try it out. If not, I'll just keep bugging every wrestling promoter to see if it's logistically possible.
No, Chip, no win the lottery, mate. Run for the council. Run for the council. Come on.
I'll leave that to Erdos. I feel like Erdos might be better at the council gig than I am.
Just the shadow man, and you're in between. Just like obviously as well, like with the Fringe, it's obviously not a wrestling based audience. It's the theatrics. It's people going around and seeing multiple things. I remember when I went to see Mythos, and people seeing intergender wrestling for the first time react very differently from people who've seen it from the indies or bigger stages. Even when there's things like saying making the tag, and people are like, laughing at that because it's like, oh, it's a wrestling thing. For yourself, Chip, how do you feel like if obviously this happens, say Disco could run a show during the Fringe, how do you think performing in front of a mostly Fringe-based crowd would react, and how would you think you would cater to that?
You got to educate them. It's if you wrestle in front of let's take the iconic Pasadena PWG venue in that crowd. If you go in on that, you're probably going to show them a lock up and a wrist lock and reversal, but they know that stuff. They're there to see, the top echelon of it. But for a mum, dad, and two kids who have maybe seen Cody Rhodes on CBBS before, they need to see the base of it. They need to see those foundations and understand the storytelling of wrestling. I think if you try and expose people to the extremes of wrestling too quickly, that's when you get people going, oh, wrestling's all, people doing all this weird comedy stuff or people doing all this bleeding stuff. Like you're not going to show someone who's never watched wrestling for the first time Moxley getting suplexed onto a spiked baseball bat, because that sets the perception of it. You're not going to show them Okada Omega 60 minutes because that sets the perception as that. It's, you would educate them and then up the ante as they got more into it. Someone used to tell me, I can't remember who, it's probably lots of people, but when you're wrestling in front of those sort of shows, you're wrestling for the dads. The kids are going to be there and enjoy it, but you need to get the dads to be reinvested. I think it's kind of based on a little bit of sexism because it's based on the premise that like the dads are the ones that buy the merch and thingy. Anyone can be the breadwinner. But the way I look at it is the dads will be the biggest skeptics. They'll be the ones that are like, this is fake. Look, you can see him slap his leg really loudly. Whereas if you can get the dads to believe what you're doing, or at least suspend their disbelief enough, then when the kid says, can we come back to the next one? It's going to be like, yeah, okay, let's do that. So I think, you would just educate them and then, start showing them the more, here's a Spanish fly, here's a tope suicida after that.
Hey, fair play indeed. And I think it's showing that, not everybody knows wrestling. Well, yes, it might be popular now than it's ever been. There are people that will never heard of it or only think of wrestling. Oh, that's giant haystacks. It's like, it's evolved. It's the new modern era. And you reintroduce them. Now, Chip, people like to say, what's the dream match? What's the dream match? But I want to make you the fantasy booker. Let's say it's Disco at the Fringe. You get to book the 4 champions. Y Division, Leon Slater, the Good Times Tags, Judas Grey with the Scottish National, and Emersyn, Jayne with the Women's. Who are you putting against these 4?
Okay, so I'm going to go with there's no budget here. Everyone can teleport to the show. I'm going to do a multi-man. We'll do one multi-man. We're going to do Leon Slater versus Aspen Faith versus Chris Hero versus Pentagon Jr. He's allowed to come out and do this contractual thing, and they're going to challenge for the Y division. In fact, let's throw Chris Sabin in, see as he's technically the lineageal champion. 5-way multi-man there. Then we'll go slightly more realistic for the rest. Let's do Emersyn Jayne versus Millie McKenzie versus Charlie Evans for that women's title. That would be sick. We're going to do Good Times versus Disco Fry because I want the tag titles. And then Judas Grey. Could Judas Grey rest? You know what? Let's do Judas Grey versus Ronan King. I feel like those guys have got some tension they need to work through. Some unaddressed tension that beating each other up might help. And I've never seen 2 boys push each other more. So I think it would be sick.
Chip, they're best friends. They're best.
Yeah, but they're best friends that hit each other harder than I've seen any best friends. So let's let them take it out in a controlled environment.
Oh, good Lord. And that's going to be amazing. You could see that, and then you just see someone pretending to be like a painted up robot down the street. The choice of the Fringe. You got to love it. Obviously, as well, before we wrap up, Chip, because you've made me very, very hungry, I want to talk about, obviously, Raw's coming to Glasgow. At the time of recording, it's in 3 days, and everyone's speculating, mostly people on the internet, that Jey Uso's mystery tag team partner against A-Town Down Under is Joe Hendry. I want to know from yourself, from somebody who's been trained by Joe and has the relationship that you do with him, what would it mean for you as a fan of his and to see him get that moment to wrestle on a episode of taped Raw that's going to be everlasting on Netflix in the Hydro in Glasgow?
It's quite simple. I believe in Joe Hendry. It's I've learned to never doubt Joe. Anytime Joe has mentioned an ambitious goal he's got, and maybe you've raised an eyebrow, it's happened. And so if I've not looked at his socials, if he's implying that he's going to be on Raw, I've learned that if Joe wants to be on Raw, Joe's going to be on Raw. He is the most over wrestler that is not on WWE TV. He's probably more over than anyone in AEW. And he is in the UK the most over guy. And he's proof that hard work pays off. I think Drew McIntyre said it on maybe Chris Van Vliet. People talk about Joe Hendry, the overnight sensation, but there was nothing overnight about it. He's been, putting in his work from ICW and disco to What Culture, there's a prestigious one, to the stuff with Leighton Buzzard, to then, ROH, to TNA, TNA not working out, then coming back, and now he's, the guy in TNA. So I think it's great when you see someone who comes into wrestling and they, like a Braun Breaker, an Obafemi, they come into wrestling and they're some of the hottest things right away. That's great. But it's when you see someone get the reward for the hard work that they're putting in, that means that when you're, considering, should I go to this extra training class? Should I drive 12 hours in the hopes of getting this booking that, is maybe going to happen? You look at Joe and you go, hard work pays off. So, for him, I hope it is him. I'll be watching from the chippy. I'm on shift that day, but we've got license to show Netflix, apparently, if anyone's legally watching. So we'll be watching rooting on, and I think regardless if Joe is on Raw or if he isn't, I think the believers will stay strong, and I think 2024 was a big year for Joe. 2025 is starting massive with the Rumble, and I think it's only going to get bigger.
Hey, absolutely, my friend. Hopefully it is him, because it'll be an absolute amazing moment that you can see on Raw promo packages for years to come. I'll probably stop by the chippy and grab something while I take up the Glasgow, because I paid that much money to stay there in the Hydro. Help me, please. But Chip, before we wrap up, mate, one final thing. Obviously, Disco has the Disco Derby coming up. It's going to be the next best thing. You've seen people like Ryan Richards, Dave Conrad saying they're wanting to get into it. They want to win championships. For yourself, Chip, you've mentioned your desire to go for the tag titles. If you're in the Disco Derby and you do manage to win it, is that the belt you're going to announce the challenge for?
I think we look at the Disco Derby and, like you say, year 10, Ryan Richards declares, don't like him, bit of a snob. Simon Miller, I liked him until he beat up Omar and was a bit of a dick to Omar, so I don't like him anymore. Dave Conrad is taking the long route and is putting the work and is going in at number 1, and I've got to respect that. But the truth is, if it gets to, the last 2 and it's me and Dave, I won't hesitate to beat his ass, and then I will declare for the tag titles, because I look at that lineage, I look at where I want to be as a wrestler, and, I could challenge Leon Slater, I could challenge Judas Grey, but I like those guys, and I think they're doing good things for the future Discovery, and I think the future Discovery is not those tag titles being held ransom by a big scary man bun guy and his little monster. So there's 30 other men in that Rumble. I don't know if I'm in it yet. I've asked the question. But if I am in it, I'm not going to be number 1. That's going to be Dave Conrad. But if they want me to come out in number 2, then I'll match him as well I can. And I will show everyone that I ain't Santino Marella. I'm Chip Watson. And if you've not caught on to that yet, then it's time to catch up.
Best words to say it, my friend. You will enter that, hopefully win it, and it'll be chippy time all around. Maybe discounts for people, maybe rewarding discounts. I don't know.
Listen, it's Q2, no discounts.
All right. Living crisis. We have to be a bit marginal here. But you know what, Chip? It's been a pleasure to have you here on this episode of the Soul Sessions. You have made me very, very hungry. I love you and I hate you for that, but I respect it. And of course, folks, if you love what you've heard of Chip Watson, I'll include his Instagram down below. You can click it, follow him, see his journey, and you can just see what he gets up to with chippy time. And folks, as I say, as a Scotsman, finish up your drink. I am not going to finish this because it's too strong and I have an empty stomach. And thank you as always for tuning in for another episode of the Soul Sessions. Boom. Now about the humans too, gonna live like animals do. No more laws and no more